Welcome to another episode of Young Entrepreneurs with the Green Roof team. Today we have a special episode. We have two team members here with us today.
Hi, I'm Josh.
Hi, I'm Tanner.
Awesome. So Josh and Tanner, would you guys like to tell the audience a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so we're both part of the Green Roof team. I myself joined last semester. I've been helping work on the turbine as well as the disaster turbine for our senior design project as well as the Green Roof team project.
Mm-hmm. I also joined back in the fall, like Josh mentioned. A lot of my work has been on the disaster resilient wind turbine and also with the Green Roof team turbine as well, up on the green roof of the College of Ag building. A lot of focus on the blades with both of those projects, moving from material selection to now more of a focus on manufacturing the blades and really realizing the shape, making things come together, answering a lot of questions. So
sweet. I know we're having a lot of fun with both the trash and the ag building turbines. Mm-hmm. And if you guys want to know more about either Tanner or Josh, we do have a personal episode with both of them earlier on in our season. So kicking off today's episode, we're going to take a step back. And would you guys like to also pitch to the audience why they should listen to this episode and others?
Yeah, it's a great source for news and the field of green energy and just entrepreneurship in general. You know, in this modern age, there's a lot of opportunities for people to do things that have never been done before or improve on things that have been done before. And I think this is a great feather in the cap of anyone that wants to hop on that train.
Yeah, for sure. I know back in the fall, when I was speaking with you, Nelson, as we were doing my first episode, I was thinking really big picture then. And that was my focus. Focused on like people unlocking potential, whether that's through energy independence, whether that is pursuing knowledge, finding ways to like innovate and learn in their own ways. I was thinking kind of in those respects. And I think more recently I've been thinking a bit more on the small scale with those interpersonal connections between our team in particular, but also just trying to find those connections between people, like individuals, and how we derive knowledge from that. So I think this podcast is an excellent way to really get a glimpse into someone else's perspective and learning from them as well. So that's why I would encourage you to listen in.
And I couldn't agree more. Being able to work with the team, finding out what everyone's special skills are, and in the end, we'll have a final product up there, giving inspiration to others and seeing what type of impact we're going to make. Mm-hmm. Sweet. So with this episode, I'd like to focus a bit more about you guys and how you work together and how you got to know one another. So how did you guys get to know one another?
That was definitely through the leadership development program back last year. We both joined that in the fall of 2020. As we both transferred here that semester, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we entered the program then at the start, and we were in it throughout that whole year together. So.
Yep. And for that, in the entire time that we were working together and as a team, there were different activities, different projects that we did for that program, and that helped develop just teamwork like skills and different ways of approaching problems, staying out of that analysis paralysis type stuff.
Yeah.
It's a lot of important things when considering projects with a team.
You bring up like analysis paralysis, I think is a really good example, and not just like analysis paralysis, but like procrastination, other aspects that keep you from hitting your goals and from achieving things. And a deadline is the most effective way to brush all of that aside. especially when you have deadlines that you are accountable, for others to meet within the program as a whole, that becomes very effective to, to get off your rear end and to start moving with something. So like Josh mentioned with analysis paralysis, where you might be sitting and thinking, oh, like, what's the best way to go about something? And I've certainly had that experience in the green roof team as well, where it's like, I've got 1,000,001 options for materials or manufacturing methods for these blades. But it's like, yeah, I can spend forever trying to find the perfect solution to this. But if I spend forever, it's never going to get done. So it's better to take that first step, and it's always that balance between preparation and action, and I think LDP was a really good example of that, where it's like, I might have not had the best way to run a project, or especially looking back, oh, I would have done this different, but you wouldn't have learned any of that if you hadn't have done it in the first place,
Definitely.
So a lot of those examples were worthwhile. I also felt like you also get the real character of someone when you're doing challenging things with them, whether it's with the LDP or whether it's with Green Roof Team. Finding things you don't know the answer to, learning them, making mistakes, and doing that alongside other people really lets you know them like beyond skin deep. That's something that I for sure got an appreciation out of while I was in the LDP, and I feel like I know Josh better because of a lot of those stressors too. So
Was there a moment last year where you guys had one of those stressors, one of those moments, and that's when you guys knew you guys are going to be friends?
I'd say probably a big event was a big one. We as a team, the entire LDP at the time, got together and helped out with a student-led, semi-student-led project across campus, which divides up volunteers and puts them to use at different projects around Carbondale, be it things like the Science Center or Chautauqua Bottoms, like we were doing, spreading gravel and clearing small brush for those walking paths. It was a day, it was a hot day, and all of us were doing physical labor, but it kind of acted like a crucible, and we had a lot of impurities removed, like, when you're melting metal and forging metal. And I like to think that us as a team, especially Tanner and I, we melded together basically in that sense.
it's like what is that, a fusion? Yeah. I think for me, something that really stood out last year when you spoke to me was the idea of like storming, norming, and reforming.
Yeah, there's a bit more, but at the time, yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, because something that's really stood out to me is your like vision and your level-headedness, like when you're in the thick of it, or like when you're in the storm. Yeah. So like when you're, as if I've got all this like marine time experience, but like when you're out at sea, and you've got these huge swells and you don't know where you're at, but you're like, okay, let me focus on my bearings here.
Yep.
And let me keep my wits about me. And it's just taking that step back to think and to move clearly so that your energy is well spent. That's the stuff that keeps projects afloat, and the stuff that keeps ships afloat as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you can spend all day, checking the riggings and making sure ropes are tied tight, but if you don't take a step back and look and see, oh yeah, our heading's that way, you're going to end up in some random island and not really know where you're at.
Yeah.
So.
And that's why Josh is my first mate.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. So carrying the friendship and bond you guys built from last year, how did you see that come in play this year? Did you guys see any stressors that you guys had to tackle together to get past?
I mean, we already know how we work basically in a team environment. So when it came to the disaster resilient turbine, we already knew when we were forming groups in the class at the very beginning. Yeah, we're probably going to work together because we already know how to work together. And then just design in general, either one of us will bounce ideas off each other, and it's an environment that it enables like positive discourse,
Ideation,
basically.
or
Yeah,
like,
ideation, and
Yeah.
it adds to the whole project. It does. It's not just, oh, I don't like that. I don't think that'll work. It's not just that. It's, I don't think that'll work because of this, and I think we should do this instead, but also mix that together. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
It's going deeper within an idea and really fleshing it out. And I think like that requires communication. It requires taking the time to communicate clearly, but below that too, it's built upon a foundation of trust.
Yep.
That you can propose and critique ideas within a constructive environment, so where you can find something that is more likely to work.
Yeah. Yep.
So nobody's expecting to get it right the first time, but if we've put in the work and we've iterated upon it enough, it's less likely to fail. Something that has stood out to me, or I think that's been more defined throughout this year, at least in some cases, I feel like I'm very prone to like vocalize my ideas, or I'll write stuff too. So I use like verbal communication a lot to try and get my ideas across, whereas I feel like Josh is a more visual portrayer of his designs and his ideas, and a picture's worth 1,000 words. There have definitely been instances where him and I have been talking about how to embody a concept, and it's like I'll talk about it to Josh, and then Josh will come up with something and sketch it down, and it's like, all right, here's the better thing. Or he'll take my 4-year-old level sketch on my piece of paper, and then he'll make it into something that like other people can understand, because this has been something for me a long time. I need to work on it, but I haven't yet. I'm a really bad sketcher and drawer, and I've always been I haven't been like shy about it or whatever, but like it does tick me off, so I've had glasses since I was like 3 or something. So, but like before then, I've been told that like I would draw something, like obviously my head is like, oh, this is the best thing ever. I'm like Picasso here, or whatever, gonna take the world by storm with my idea. And then I was farsighted, so then I would like lean back and I would look at it and like, that's not what I drew. That's terrible, So art has never been my thing. I didn't get enjoyment out of it, and I never thought that it was useful until I got into like college or something. And then we were talking about, technical drawing and drafting and like communicating your design ideas to people. And it's like, I can talk about this for as long as I want, but like it's not going to get it across like a picture would, So I feel like in those ways we're able to complement one another. Or where it's like maybe Josh doesn't want to speak up on something, well, I'm gonna speak up for him. So there's that back and forth there.
Now that's a really good point, especially when it comes to building teams.
Yep.
Knowing the type of people you have on a team, knowing what type of skills they are and what kind of character they have.
Mhm.
If that's going to be someone that's going to back you up.
Yeah, exactly.
So, where do you guys see yourselves in relation to one another in the coming years now that we're graduating?
That's a really good question.
That is a good question.
I haven't thought about it at all. Yeah, it's I had my vice president for Phi Theta Kappa back at Lakeland. Him and I would say we were pretty tight back then. And like same with the secretary. And us three got along really well. We would hang out like, while we were all at Lakeland, and I had him over to my house at least once with like, at least I would say for community college, it's a big thing because everybody lives like 30 miles away from one another, but like I'll text him every now and then, like, we'll text back like happy birthday or whatever, but it's pretty base, and that's okay because people come and go in different seasons of your life, and so it's no good to say I wish this would be different, but just be thankful for the time that you had, so that's okay. I've let people come and go in my life, and people have done the same to me, and that's perfectly fine. There are certainly people though that I put forth the action and the intention to keep around in my life because they make me better people, for one thing. And I do think Josh is one of those people.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
like 10 years from now, I'd love to be sitting in a bar, I don't drink, sharing a soda and a beer, maybe talking about how the job's doing, how life's going, talking about just the current news and happenings and stuff. That'd be great. I moved around a lot as a kid, a couple of really big moves, and I learned a lot from that, but particularly with friends and people that you've met and people that you work with. You want to try and keep that open line of communication, because as soon as one person lets it go, it's hard to keep that going. So yeah, definitely gonna try and keep that communication going. Yeah, if I end up going to work with Tanner where he's working, that'd be great. But just hopefully we'll both still be in the United States.
yeah. I also feel like Morgan might not let me
Oh yeah.
be a stranger, but so.
Sweet. Cool. So one thing I would like to talk about was you guys alluded earlier about the wind turbine blade design and manufacturing side. So from what I know, Josh, you're more on the design side, Tanner, you're more on the manufacturing side.
Mhm.
So connecting that to how you guys talked about earlier about that connection and building off one another.
Mhm.
You guys want to go a bit more technical on that side of the project?
Sure.
Yeah. You want to start?
Yeah. So basically, it starts with 3D modeling the blade or the wing in just any program, and we started to use QBlade, and our supervisor for that project section had us, a couple of the design people, take different NACA and different airfoils that were pre-designed from other companies and go into QBlade and construct these wings, these propeller blades, and run tests on them to just get data on them and prioritize what we want in that design of the blade. Tip speed ratio, you got your twist and all that, and different chord lengths. And after that, we are supposed to turn that data and that 3D model into a 3D model that can then be 3D printed. And in this case, what we're thinking is a 3D printed mold for the final product. And then that's where Tanner comes in.
Yeah. So once you've got a lot of those design parameters defined, and like this is, the end product that I'm envisioning, then it's going more so to my side of things, which is where, okay, how do we get from nothing to that? So how do we first off choose our materials that we want to work with, and then how do we actually get those raw materials into the shape that we want? The shaping process is the main thing. So I guess really obviously I can talk about this forever, but to really summarize with the material selection, we ended up going with carbon fiber is something that we wanted for its strength and stiffness while still being very light. Another advantage that I was looking at is that we're able to do a manual wet layup process with that. So to go more in detail on that, if we use the shape that's been designed and we create a mold from that, which can be 3D printed, we 3D print that into sections, put together that mold, and then we use a carbon fiber wet layup. So we take some epoxy, we brush that onto the mold cavity, put our first layer of carbon fiber weave, dab the epoxy through, layer again. When we do that until we've got the whole thing covered, let that cure, then release it from the mold, do finishing. We've got one half of the plate there. Then you can also do your top half and your bottom half in that manner. The big question we're coming to right now and have to address is how do we actually get those top and bottom together? Right now, I think our two main candidates are taking your top and bottom, clamping them, then putting a strip of carbon fiber around that and more epoxy to let that cure. And so you finally got your final shape. Then you need to sand it down and get that looking nice and smooth again. Although then there's also the potential of using foam. So if we take a step back, we've got the mold again. If we put the entire mold top and bottom together, fill that with foam, let that expand to fill the shape, take apart the mold, then we've got a foam plug or core pattern. Then we can drape and lay carbon fiber over that, kind of like a pinata. Is I guess the analogy that keeps popping in my head.
Yeah.
So you're able to let that cure on one side, dry on one side, flip that over, put the epoxy on, and then we've got your blade like that. And the joining problem has been foregone. Granted, that introduces other questions like, can the mold withstand that expansion of foam? Do we need to put some flanges to bolt that down? So a lot of questions to still be finalized and worked out there. But it's answering these questions to actually realize those designs.
And each way, whether the sandwich approach or just the foam plug idea, each one's going to have its own little issues that you solve along the way, and also advantages. With the foam idea, you can put spars in it, and that'll provide extra stability on the leading or trailing edge of the propeller. The sandwich idea is great because it's even less weight, assuming that it's strong enough to keep shape in high winds. It'll be less weight, so easier to move. So, but yeah, it's all about just balancing advantages and disadvantages.
And trying to keep taking a step back and seeing that 30,000 foot view and having a holistic approach to it, where it's how do we make a design to fit our function that is also manufacturable within our means and our tools, and how do we make the product engineering and the manufacturing engineering work hand in hand? That's a huge question in a lot of companies.
Yep.
So
Most definitely. I know that there's a lot of conflicting views between the design side, manufacturing, and their overall big picture.
Yeah.
In general.
Yeah. I know my first internship back in summer of 2019, That's in my freshman year. I was working in a product engineering department, and then this last summer I was working in like process engineering, manufacturing engineering. So yeah, seeing both sides of it, it's very very interesting for sure. So
Which side did you feel was easier?
was easier conceptually. I feel like it's what you put into it, you know, because so oddly enough, I actually ended up doing more design work as like an assembly process or manufacturing engineer than I did while I was a product engineering intern, you know. So like for the product engineers, I was running tests a lot on like O-rings, fasteners, a lot of interfaces, and testing them for like stresses to see what they could withstand. So, and then I would, like I would run my tests, analyze my data, send recommendations back to the product engineers there. So it was more like material selection, kind of finding those answers. But with one of the main things I did this last summer as a manufacturing engineer was I developed like basically I made a bracket for this fancy camera that could go on this assembly line and fit into a workpiece to like perform an evaluation or a function. So I actually had to like come up with the idea and 3D print it, work with one of the guys at that business who does a lot of the 3D printing stuff for them, So it's interesting how different and broad either of those disciplines can be. I would say it's really dependent upon your company. So because I'm doing all of that stuff, and then where I'll be working at come graduation, it'll be a totally different thing. So it'll be new stuff for me to learn.
Sweet. So pivoting back onto the blades and going about the different iterations, did you guys have a couple moments where you just began throwing out ideas and going back and forth? Can you talk a bit about how those conversations went?
You mean like us concerning the blades in particular, or
and ideating how to go about maybe putting in the foam versus maybe another idea?
Most of that happened at the very beginning. I remember sitting both in the green roof lab as well as just in his living room, just throwing different ideas back and forth about, how would you manufacture this? How do people make these things in the real world? And from prior knowledge of just making or watching people make like props and stuff on YouTube, it teaches you a lot. So I brought some ideas to the table and he brought others, and they were really good ideas. That's originally how we got to finding out how to make the molds.
Mhm.
And specifically from those types of molds are used with like fiberglass casting and making fiberglass shells for things, be it helmets or anything like that.
A lot of like aquatic stuff, I think.
Oh, definitely aquatic stuff.
Yeah, sports things.
Yep.
So
that was a big thing at the beginning, is finding out how to do that. And then from that that mold idea, then you go in with like the carbon fiber. Carbon fiber works pretty similar to fiberglass in that you apply layers and then build on those layers with epoxy and then the sheets of the fabric material. So okay, yeah, that'll work for what we're trying to do. And then he comes up with the idea the other day of the foam plug. That also builds off of the mold idea that we had at the beginning. And we start throwing things around like, oh, would the 3D printed mold be strong enough to do the foam? And okay, so we're going to have to build some sort of box or clamping mechanism to keep it equal pressure on all sides of the mold. So stuff like that we just keep throwing back and forth between each other and building on an idea.
It's not necessary to have like some totally new, like novel idea, like, oh, I'm gonna win the Nobel Prize with this world-changing innovation or whatever, but it's about how do I take what I know or what I can learn, how do I modify that to accomplish what the team's envisioning,
Yeah.
you know, and those ways to innovate are you know, those steps towards big milestones and big progress.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see how the blades come out from turning out the modes, getting it manufactured and then installed coming up real soon. So what are you guys looking forward to in the next month and a half we have here?
I think for me, I'm really excited to see like blades manufactured, installed, and working. Um, we had a big accomplishment. I mean, was it this last week or the week before with the disaster resilient turbine of getting everything put together there and it functioning? And especially, I mean, when you two went out and tested the blades themselves outside, I mean, that made me super happy. I love seeing all that work and all that planning like come to a fruition and like a realization. So that's what I'm looking forward to now that I've had some of that with the disaster resilient wind turbine. I want to see that with the new green roof turbine as well.
Yeah, anytime you see a brainchild of a team just take off and start running on its own, it's like, you know, watching the first astronauts walk around the moon. It's just such a rush, and dare I say, it's addicting.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I'm just looking forward to more and more of those times where, as a team, we sit down and we get to see, you know, the wind turbine spinning, either one of the wind turbines, trash turbine or, you know, the green roof turbine, and just sitting back and watching it and say, wow, we really did that.
Yeah.
And then 5 seconds later, okay, how do we improve on it? You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to wrapping up both projects and seeing, you know, what experiences I gained from it and what I learned about other people in the team while doing it.
Sweet. So coming up towards the end of today's episode, is there anything you guys would like to leave with the audience before we head out?
Yeah. I would say a lot of the things that I've learned, you know, especially from Josh and from a lot of different people with Green Roof Team, is that people communicate in a lot of different ways, and it can be reflective of the strengths they have, like as a person or as a designer, as you know, whoever they are, you know, whether it's like verbal communication, visual communication, and just a plethora of variations on all that. So I just encourage everybody to continue to observe and receive more than you know, like speak out. You know, we've got 2 ears, we've only got 1 mouth. So appreciate those people around you and the messages they are sending. You might not be inclined to communicate in that way, but if you're willing to take that step back and observe, you can learn so much more.
Yeah, I completely agree. What I would say is, don't be afraid to fail. I know a ton of people say that all the time, but recently experiencing trying to manually insulate copper wire for the use in electric motors. You know, it might not work, and you might be able to go and buy 3 pounds of copper wire, 24 gauge, I might add, on Amazon, and have it get there 3 days later. You know, that's great, but unless you step back and you sit down with the person that you were doing that with, and you know, you go over what went well, what went wrong, and how to fix it. Did you really learn anything from that failure? So I think analyzing things whether it be successful, failure, or somewhere in between, is essential for the design and iteration process. Because repeating things over and over and over again, that's just, it's not going to work unless you make little changes and you learn from your mistakes.
We do all this for the successes, to see things work
Yeah.
and to see our ideas come to fruition, but we gain so much more from the failures.
Oh yeah.
That is where we learn, and that is where we grow as people.
Couldn't agree more. And with that, we conclude another episode of Young Entrepreneurs with the Green Root Team. Today, with our special guests, Tanner Clark and Josh Konolinka. Stay sustainable, folks.